Welcome into the Fantasy Football Diagnostics Podcast, where we provide you with your weekly diagnosis of everything fantasy football. Whether it's season-long leagues, dynasty, DFS, or sometimes even IDP, we got you covered all year long. Let's do it. Let's get to it. Welcome to the Fantasy Football Diagnostics. I'm your host, Jon Jeune. It is December 31st, 2024, 7 a.m. Eastern here. And hopefully, if you're listening to this right now, you're fired up because you won a fantasy football championship. If that is not you, that is unfortunate. It happens, but it's also part of what is going to get us motivated going into next season. I know myself, I'm a little, I could do better. I could be doing better this morning. Had 3 fantasy football championships that I was competing in. And in 2 of them, I was going up against T. Higgins and Trey McBride. That was a combined 70 PPR points that I had to try and make up for. And in one league that felt insurmountable, in another league, which, turned out to be insurmountable. In another league, just because of the way that the lineups are and the scoring, I felt like I had a chance, and I did have a chance. Came down to Jahmyr Gibbs last night, and I needed 34 PPR points. I got 27. So 27 and some change. So yeah, you could imagine how your boy felt going to bed last night and waking up this morning. But you know what? It is what happens, right? Somebody's going to be on the side of it. Can't always be us. So, I was pretty upset, pretty butthurt, if I must say. But the grind don't stop. There's folks out there playing Week 18 fantasy football. Don't know why y'all do it, but the fact that y'all do it means that I'm going to be up here talking through some things, right? For the waiver show. And the Week 18 is a very interesting week, right? It's almost like you almost have to throw a lot of things out, right? Because you have some teams that are playing for nothing, right? And what I mean by that is that you might have, obviously, you have the teams that have been playing for nothing since they've been eliminated from playoff contention, like the Jets and the Niners and, the Seahawks, right? Or I guess the Seahawks were just recently eliminated. But, you've got the Jets and the Niners, for example, and the Giants. And, those teams have been playing for nothing. Jacksonville, Las Vegas, right? So there's no reason to expect them to do anything differently in Week 18. But then you have the teams that have just recently been eliminated, like the Seahawks, right? So it's like, how do they handle it, right? We haven't seen them do it all year. I would anticipate that those teams, they continue playing through. You might see some guys that are maybe have been dealing with some injuries get shut down. And then you've got the teams like the Chiefs and the Bills and the Texans who don't have anything to play for, right? They've already locked up a playoff spot. They're locked into their seed, right? The Bills and the Eagles can't advance past the 2 seed in their respective conferences, and they can't fall below the 2 seed in their respective conferences. So those are teams that going into week 18 don't have anything to play for. And so those are the teams that we, from a fantasy perspective, the Josh Allens and the James Cooks and the AJ Browns and the Devontae Smiths and the Saquon Barkleys, we might want to stay away from. Now, Saquon Barkley is an interesting one because Saquon Barkley is chasing Eric Dickerson's record, right? 2,105 rushing yards. And I think that Saquon is just over 2,000. I don't know if it's 2,001 or if it's just over 2,000, but basically he would need like 100, essentially like 105 yards or so to, 106 yards or so to break that record. Now, if the Eagles put him out there for the sake of that record, then yeah, from a fantasy perspective, you play him because that's enough. That's enough production there to have a fantasy friendly day. However, if they could very much say, and Saquon's done this before, right? Where it's like, hey, you're about to break this record, or you're going to go over this milestone. Do you want to stay in the game? He's like, nah, I'm good. So, um, I wouldn't be shocked if he foregoes the opportunity to break this record with, more important things in sight. So, I'm kind of spitballing here, but essentially this is what I'm trying to get to you guys is that this is going to be a week that's based on information more than any other week, right? Because it's just a matter of who's playing, who's not, right? The Chiefs have already, it's already been reported that they're going to sit Patrick Mahomes. And you can imagine if they sit Patrick Mahomes, they're probably going to sit some other important starters as well. So, but you also want to look at the games where these teams have something to play for, right? Like the Lions and the Vikings. Those teams basically are coming down to an NFC North championship where the winner of that game is crowned the NFC North champion as well as the number one seed in the NFC, which means they would not only just get the bye, but they would hold home field advantage throughout the playoffs. So that is a very important thing to play for. And so you'll see both these teams, the Lions and the Vikings, doing everything they can on Sunday night to try to win that game. So those are the games that you want to make sure you're targeting. Or, if you have players from those players, must be in your lineups at that point. Obviously, not imagining that they wouldn't be, but you know what I'm trying to say here, right? So those are the games that you want to target, right? Like the Tampa Bay has to win against who does Tampa Bay play? I think Tampa Bay plays New Orleans. Let me check that. I think, and Tampa Bay plays New Orleans and Carolina plays Atlanta, right? And so both Tampa Bay needs to win against New Orleans in order to win the NFC South, but Atlanta needs Tampa Bay to lose in order and then they need to beat Carolina in order to win the NFC South. So, those are games that you want to make sure you're targeting as well from that perspective. So, let's jump into some waiver stuff. I don't have a whole lot today. Again, I just want to make sure that the information I have is, was correct and whatnot before I start coming out here making any waiver recommendations. I think I totally advise you guys to take the opportunity to do that as well. There's no Thursday night football this week. There's no Monday night football this week. All we have is 2 games on Saturday and the remaining 14 games on Sunday. So not a whole lot to adjust to, not a whole lot to plan for. So we've got time to get this information in, and we've got time to adjust on the fly here. So, um, don't take everything that I'm saying here as gospel here. Again, I'm only reacting to the information that's been made available to us. And right now, at this point in the week, teams probably haven't quite figured out or haven't really communicated what their plan is quite openly. So, if you see something that differs from what I'm saying here, or you guys identify an opportunity to pick up a player or a defense, um, that might be, in an advantageous spot because of how their opponents plan to handle the situation, then by all means make those moves. One of the things I would say, piece of advice, is check the betting lines, right? What is Vegas saying? Because, you look at that Buffalo game, for example, Buffalo versus New England, the last time they played, it was 9.5 point favorites um, in New England, right? So, you're like, okay, well, you know, that game was close, but Buffalo being at home, you know, they should trounce New England, right? And you go and you look at that game, and Buffalo's only 3 point favorites now. And so 3 point favorites at home has got to make you wonder why, right? So be mindful of things like that, where you see a betting line and it doesn't quite make sense. And so you'll have an idea that, all right, well, maybe this team plans to start their players and sit them at halftime, right? Which we've seen a lot of teams do that, right? Um, maybe they get a little bit of work and then they sit the players down, or maybe because of what happened in another game, you see them sit their starters at halftime, right? So, um, just again for the last time in 2024, just make sure you are commenting, liking, subscribing, whether you're subscribed and listening to this on any podcast platform such as Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Play, or if you're watching live here on X, Instagram, Twitch, or YouTube. Without further ado, let's jump into the Week 18 Fantasy Football Waiver Show, starting with Carolina quarterback Bryce Young, available in 82% of Yahoo leagues. Again, he was very solid this past week up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Has a good matchup this week coming up against Atlanta. He's got back-to-back games of at least 16.9 fantasy points. He's scored at least 16.5 fantasy points in 4 of his last 6 games. So he's been pretty solid all year. And I think last week was the lowest production that we've seen him have on the ground. But Atlanta's more than beatable offense, or defense rather. And again, Atlanta has something to play for on the other side. So, you'll see them trying to win this game by any means necessary. And Carolina offensively will have to keep pace with that Atlanta offense if they can get going. Next up, got Russell Wilson available in 56% of Yahoo leagues. And this is a possibility that the Falcons win, or sorry, the Steelers have a chance to win the division against a very beatable Cincinnati defense, with a very beatable, or very desperate rather, Cincinnati offense on the other side, right? So, Baltimore and Pittsburgh are, essentially fighting here for the AFC North title. Both these teams play on Saturday, and the Ravens play the Browns at 1 o'clock, and the Steelers play the Bengals here at 4:30 on Saturday. And so this puts up, creates an interesting situation here where the Steelers could be scoreboard watching up until kickoff of their game, and if Baltimore does win, which they're expected to, they're 17.5-point favorites against the Browns. If they do win, there's a possibility the Steelers look at this situation and say, hey, what are we risking our guys for? Like, we got a playoff game next week. Um, let's just let's sit this one out. Like, there's no reason to play this game. So that is a possibility. That is something to pay attention to. But if you want to take the chance and you see some information from, the Steelers and head coach Mike Tomlin that they have no intention to do anything like that, then Russell Wilson makes a ton of sense in this spot here against the Cincinnati defense. Another quarterback that I would take a look at is Michael Penix Jr., available in 86% of Yahoo leagues. Wasn't quite the hasn't had quite the, fantasy performances that we would have liked in these last two games, about 17 fantasy points combined. However, this week he's got a matchup against Carolina in a must-win game, right, for Atlanta. So there's a possibility here that we see the best game from Michael Penix that we've seen thus far, which I think is very plausible here. All right, moving on to the running back position. Let's talk about Las Vegas Raiders running back Amir Abdullah, available in 65% of Yahoo leagues. I did say last week that I would be more inclined to play Abdullah ahead of Madison, and did not anticipate the, carry production or the volume of carries that we saw from Abdullah. 20 carries for 115 yards, also adding 3 receptions for 32 yards, 17.7 PPR points. Madison did have, I think it was 10 or 12 carries. Just again, was not efficient on them. Did not convert on any goal line opportunities. And Abdullah was able to be the lead back here for the Raiders. However, he did suffer an injury late in the fourth quarter and did not return, but it was unclear if that was because of the score, as the Raiders were up by double digits, or if that was just a function of, the fact that he legitimately could not go back in that game. But Amir Abdullah would probably be the primary running back here to acquire off waivers if you are looking for some help at the position. Secondly, let's talk about Denver running back Jaleel McLaughlin, available in 86% of Yahoo leagues. Talked about him again in the matchup show. He is in a situation here where, again, the Denver Broncos, they need to win. They're playing against what looks like it might be Kansas City Chiefs backup players. Denver's 8.5-point favorites against Kansas City this Sunday. So that should pretty much, tell you everything you need to know about how the Chiefs plan to approach this game. But McLaughlin led, the Denver backfield in touches this past Saturday, 10 carries for 69 rushing yards. Also added 2 catches on 2 targets for 7 receiving yards. So, like I said, he's been their most impressive running back, and it's do or die time right now for the Broncos. So I would only anticipate seeing Jaleel McLaughlin get more work as we move ahead. So, I think he's definitely the most trustworthy running back in that backfield. Moving on to the next guy, we've got Arizona running back Michael Carter, available in 97% of Yahoo leagues. Now, Carter had 15 touches for 81 rushing yards here, or 15 touches for 81 total yards here this past week against the Rams. James Conner played in that game, very sparingly, immediately took himself out. Um, and Michael Carter ended up finishing the rest of the way. Trey Benson is still out or was out, so there's a possibility he could miss this game, which would mean Michael Carter is the lead back here again for the Arizona Cardinals as they take on the San Francisco 49ers. If Michael Carter or if Trey Benson does return, I do like his prospects as well. Available in 81% of Yahoo leagues, dealing with that injured ankle. Did practice in some limited capacities this week, but just wasn't good enough to go in the game on Saturday night. So it's possible that Trey Benson could be healthy. Uh, but again, I would probably prioritize Michael Carter based on the information that we have now, but Trey Benson, would be, a very close second for me behind Michael Carter. Or maybe you already have Trey Benson from last week and you stuck him in an IR spot or something, and now you're just gonna pick up Michael Carter here. Next up, a name I didn't think I'd say all season, but New Orleans running back Clyde Edwards-Helaire, available in 99% of Yahoo leagues. He actually, so he prior to Kendre Miller leaving the game with an injury for a concussion, Clyde Edwards-Helaire actually got the start and the first touch for for the New Orleans Saints. And so if Kamara can't go, because Kamara is also trying to hit 1,000 yards, which apparently he's never done before, 1,000 rushing yards. So he's trying to hit that milestone. So if he can go, I think he will go to try to get that. I think he's like 25 yards short or something like that. But Clyde Edwards-Helaire seemed to get majority of the touches in that backfield, 5 carries for 20 yards, 2 of 4 targets for 10 yards. So it seems like he was the preferred option in that backfield, and he would most likely continue to be that if Alvin Kamara is out and misses time. So Clyde Edwards-Helaire should be on your radar heading into waivers this week. Moving on to the wide receiver position, let's talk Washington wide receiver Olamide Zaccheaus, available in 97% of Yahoo leagues. Zaccheaus, again, had himself another day on Sunday, catching 8 of 9 targets for 85 receiving yards and a touchdown, back-to-back games with 8+ targets, and another solid matchup on deck against the Dallas Cowboys. Washington doesn't have a whole lot to play for. It's pretty much just seeding, right? Do they want to be the 5 seed or do they want to be the 6 seed? And so I think they are, just sorting themselves out between themselves and the Green Bay Packers. However, Zaccheaus, I would imagine that the Commanders want to continue playing. Maybe it's a situation again where they scoreboard watch a little bit and see what the score of the Green Bay game is and maybe decide to sit some guys. But Zaccheaus has been on fire these last couple games, or he's heating up, I guess we would say, if we're playing NBA Jams rules. But, I think we want to continue to stay in the fire there with Zaccheaus and, again, Jaden Daniels, because we want to be attached to that offense and what Jaden Daniels is doing right now. Next up, we've got Ricky Pearsall. Had himself a day on Monday Night Football. Big time performance by him. 8 catches for 141 yards and a touchdown on 10 targets. Also had 2 rush attempts for 6 yards. What a day for the second-year wide receiver. Definitely not short on talent. Ricky Pearsall is. So as they face off against the Arizona Cardinals next week, he's a guy that you could definitely look to potentially add to your fantasy roster. and help you in help you at the wide receiver position or even a flex play this week. Moving on to the tight end position, Tennessee tight end Chig Okonkwo, available in 71% of Yahoo leagues, didn't have the game that I think if you look at what he had done in previous weeks, it wasn't in line with that, but it was definitely still a respectable fantasy performance with 10.9 PPR points. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to pull him up. 10.9 PPR points. So again, double-digit PPR points 3 games in a row. Has 28 targets in his last 3 games. Even saw a rush attempt last week to make for 8 opportunities. So he's becoming a concerted part of this offense. And the Titans, I believe, play they play the Texans this week. So again, Texans are one of those teams. They're locked in seeding. They have nothing to play for. It's a possibility that maybe they sit their guys, but sounds like, oh, well, you look at that Vegas line, the Titans are 1.5 point favorites. So, it's possible that maybe they sit their guys at halftime or something. But Chig needs to be on the fantasy radar there. Now there is a possibility that Mason Rudolph and Will Levis both play on Sunday, which would not be great for, I think, Chig. But from a tight end perspective, I think he definitely provides as much upside as any other tight end you'd find on waivers right now. Next up is New Orleans tight end Jon Jeune, available in 88% of Yahoo leagues, had 10 targets on Sunday, has a matchup this week against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay must win the game. They can get some help from Carolina, but I think if you control your own destiny, you'd rather control it on as much as you can. So Tampa Bay needs to win, but New Orleans, not that they have nothing. I mean, they have really nothing to play for other than, pride and building on a winning culture or trying to establish some sort of a winning culture, whatever coach jargon you want to speak, right? But Spencer Rattler is trying to have some fun out there, right? So I think he's got nothing to lose. He's going to throw it around like he did this past week, and I think Jon Jeune will be a primary benefactor of that. Moving on to the next tight end on this list, the last one we'll talk about, Cincinnati tight end Mike Gesicki, available in 86% of Yahoo leagues. Gesicki is hot and cold a lot of times, had 12 targets on Saturday. Their next matchups this week is against Pittsburgh. Again, that game could get a little crazy. Cincinnati, they need to win to make the playoffs, right? But they also need help, right? So even though basically if they go out and they win this game on Saturday, they will be sitting down on Sunday watching and hoping that the Chiefs backups can beat the Broncos and that the New York Jets can beat the Dolphins, right? And then at that point they will be able to clinch a playoff spot. But without those two things happening, there's no shot. But with the fact that their game takes place on Saturday is good for from a fantasy perspective, because that they'll be going out doing everything they can to win that game. So Mike Gesicki, again, was heavily involved. Will he be that involved again this week? I don't know. It's hard to tell because he literally will go a 4 or 5 game stretch without seeing 12 targets. And then he comes out on one Saturday and sees 12 targets, right? So hopefully, this is something that continues. But if you need a high upside tight end, you could probably go in worse spots than Gesicki. Okay, let's move on to the defenses, streaming defenses for the week. Um, Again, another, I would say, solid week in that department. Uh, as we talked about quite a number of defenses, but one that I did say was my preferred option above all the other ones that we talked about. I said I sneakily preferred them above all the other ones was Seattle. 3.5 point favorites on the road. They ended up winning, I think, by 3 points in a crazy. When I say crazy, like not a great game. But they were the third ranked defense on the week. So that was awesome. Um, the Raiders were another one that I was into. They finished ninth. Um, I did not, I think the people that went with Indianapolis are probably like kicking themselves right now. They were 7.5 point favorites on the road and just got demolished by the Giants. But anyway, Tampa Bay was another one that we gave out last week. They finished eighth. New Orleans finished 25th, but we weren't really high on New Orleans. But um, yeah, I think it was all in all solid week for defensive streams that we were giving out. So let's do it again this week. Um, First one up is the Atlanta Falcons. They are available in 70% of Yahoo leagues, 7.5 point favorites at home versus Carolina. So got to feel good about that spot there. Must-win game for the Falcons. They are at home. Again, 7.5 point favorites. And as good as Carolina's offense can be at times, um, you know, Bryce Young still gets sacked a decent amount. Um, he doesn't turn the ball over a ton, but there's uh, some avenues to defensive scoring there for the Atlanta Falcons. Um, Staying in the NFC South, let's talk about Tampa Bay. They're probably actually my number one target, I would say. Available in 55% of Yahoo leagues, 13.5 point favorites at home against Spencer Rattler and the New Orleans Saints. And again, what is a must-win game for Tampa Bay? Again, they can lose this game and still have a chance to win the NFC South and make the playoffs. But it'd be criminal if this team didn't make the playoffs. But either way, they need help here. They would need help if they don't win. So they might as well just go out and handle their own business and win this game. So 13.5 point favorites at home against New Orleans. You got to feel good about that one. So I would trust this Tampa Bay defense to bring it home for us this week. Last but not least, the ones who got it done for us last week, Seattle defense special teams, available in 64% of Yahoo leagues. 3 point favorites on the road. The Rams don't have anything to play for. Neither does Seattle, but the Rams are, again, headed to the playoffs, NFC West champs. So they can literally sit back and um, relax here. So I just don't see a scenario here where there's really much for there's really much that the Niners or the Niners. There's not much for the Rams to do in this one, right? No sense in risking any of their players in this game. So who's that? What does that look like? Jimmy G, Stetson Bennett. I have no idea what it's going to look like for the Rams there. So all I know is it probably won't mean Cooper Kupp, probably won't mean Puka Nacua, probably doesn't mean Kyron Williams. So situation here where Seattle defense, I like their chances. All right, y'all. That is all I have for the Week 18 waiver show. And for the last time in 2024, appreciate y'all. We'll see you on Friday morning, 7 a.m. Eastern, live as we go through the matchup show. So until next time, see you next year. Peace.